Hello, my name is Anish Desai. I am in 6th grade, and today we will be covering biological molecules. In this presentation, we will cover biological molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and some fun facts. Introduction to biological molecules. A biological molecule is produced by a living organism and essential to a biological process. They can either be large or small. The large biological molecules includes carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. However, the small ones includes vitamins and hormones. Part 1. Carbohydrates. Monosaccharides and disaccharides. So monosaccharides are the most simplest kind of sugars, and they come in 3 varieties: glucose, fructose, and galactose. There are also many different combinations you can make which form disaccharides. So the 3 disaccharides are glucose and fructose, which is the most common, which makes sucrose. Another one you might have heard of is glucose and galactose, which makes lactose. The final one is 2-glucose, which makes a maltose compound. The next one is a polysaccharide. Polysaccharides are just like disaccharides, except instead of just 2 sugars bonded together, it's many sugars strung together in a long chain. And these chains can be different. The most common one is cellulose, which is just a bunch of glucose strung together. Another one is amylose, which is really similar to cellulose. Now we have cellulose, okay? So cellulose is just a bunch of glucose stuck together, and it's the most organic compound on Earth. Now, another thing about cellulose, it's actually everywhere. As far as you can look, you're going to see cellulose everywhere because it is the main component in grass. Now, one thing that's key about cellulose is that it's unable to be digested by humans. Now we have starches, and starches are used by plants to store glucose. And it's found in grain products such as wheat and barley, and it's used to make bread, the stuff that we eat every day. Now, one of the main starches is amylose, and like I said before, amylose and cellulose are really common, except one is grass and the other is bread, like chemistry. Now, there's another starch which is called glycogen, and it's a starch very similar to cellulose and amylose, except it has more branches, and it's therefore more complex, and it's used to store carbohydrate energy in the body. Part 2, lipids. So we have fats. Now, a subgroup of fats are fatty acids, and fatty acids come in 2 main types: saturated and unsaturated. The difference between them is that saturated has a lot of hydrogen in it. So when you have a saturated fat, it contains carbon atoms that are single bonded to another carbon atom, and it just follows the sequence. And at the end is our carboxyl group, or COOH. And what we mean by saturated is that it's saturated with hydrogen. Now, unsaturated it's just like a saturated, but it's kinked. And so instead of double bonds, it's just a single bond at like the center of it. Now some key fats are triglycerides, which are made by an alcohol known as glycerol, and 3 fatty acids, saturated or unsaturated, to make a triglyceride. And they're formed in the white parts of meat. And then if you combine 2 fatty acids with a glycerol and then a phosphate group, you get a phospholipid. A phospholipid is, like we said, it's 2 fatty acids with a glycerol and a phosphate group. Now the phosphate group gives it a polarity at its head. The phospholipid has a head and 2 flagella-like tails. Now, since the head has a polarity, it is therefore attracted to water. But the tails are made of fatty acids, and fatty acids are neutral, so they're actually hydrophilic. So if you're going to put a lot of phospholipids in water, they're all going to form an arrangement they're all going to form like this rectangular arrangement where the heads will face the water and the tails will face each other, staying away from the water. And then we have steroids. One thing that's key about steroids is that it always has 4 carbon interconnected rings. This is true for all steroids. And one of the most common ones is cholesterol. There are 2 types of cholesterol. There's the good kind, which is HDL, and the bad kind, which is LDL. And the steroids can also be lipid hormones. The 2 most common ones are estradiol, which is the female sex hormone, and testosterone, which is the male sex hormone. Part 3, proteins. So we have amino acids. So amino acids have 2 main groups, a carboxyl group, which we discussed earlier, and an amino group. This is how it gets its name, amino acid. Now the amino group has NH2. And the thing about NH2 is, since nitrogen is in the air, but we can't just extract it, amino acids or proteins are the only way to get nitrogen into our body, and it is essential actually. Now, there are 9 amino acids that we cannot get ourselves. These are histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. And if you don't have all of these, then you can't go a very important process known as photosynthesis, because it can only happen when you have the amino acids necessary. And now we have polypeptides. Polypeptides are actually very basic. They're just a lot of amino acids strung together in a chain. Just like the and the proteins are formed by polypeptides, and the thing about polypeptides is that they have a property where they can twist, coil, and fold. And then we have some extras. We have some fun facts. So fructose is actually sweeter than glucose. It's found in fruits also. Polysaccharides are able to store energy, but in our bodies it's used as ATP. Plants use starches to store glucose. Humans' glycogen will deplete if it doesn't eat for an entire day. Fats are disliked by all girls. Lipids are insoluble. And trans fat are just unsaturated fats, except instead of kinking, like a normal unsaturated fat, it actually just goes straight, so it's super bad for you because of that non-kink. And the only way to differ between an amino acids are by the R group, which is a side chain, which gives you 20 different amino acids. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.